Alright guys, so in this video I will go through very quickly about the big mesh option. So you can find our options, big mesh options under our texture settings over on the right side. So make sure you just select the tab texture sets and under big mesh just click on it. So this time around, unlike our environment, we are not using any ID options and stuff. We are not using any vertex color. So we are actually going to just click on big all texture set and that's it, and let it run. So it's not a very difficult process. Again, you just have to go to texture settings, big mesh. There isn't much settings to change. Just click on big mesh and you will see all the maps being baked out for you. There are some maps that are really not that useful, but we're going to bake them out just in case you need to use them. Almost done. So once the mesh is being baked out, what we're going to do next is to start off with a very simple example, which is the shirt. And I'll show you guys how to texture out the shirt as well. So whatever we're going to do here today or in this video, it can be applied to every single part of your model. It's going to be very similar to your environment modeling or texturing as well. So if you already know how to texture your environment and you're comfortable with that, you can actually skip this part of the video and continue with your own assignment. Okay, so without further ado, let's just go straight to our model here. You can see that for this shirt, I have broken out the UV into quite a few different parts, and we're going to actually make use of this for our texturing. So for example, I'm just going to drag and drop one material here. So in our bottom shelf, you can see there's quite a few different materials. So I'm just going to drag and drop this example here where you can find that there are some threads going across. So again, for this example, I'm going to keep to this scaling because you can really see the line very clearly. So otherwise, usually I will bring it down to a smaller value where it's much more realistic in terms of the scaling. But just for this example, again, I'm just going to blow it up so that we can see the lines. And the reason is because later on, we want to make sure that all the lines for the sleeve and the shirt, they are kind of consistent throughout rather than going across in different directions. So you will understand more as I progress further. So once I have applied the material, the first thing that I actually do is to actually apply or actually change the color of my material. So under your material on the right side, you can actually click some of the buttons here and find out more about the details. So under parameters, you can see that you have top color and bottom color. So different material slots will have different parameters and the settings here will be different as well. So what we want to do here is just to change the color. So I'm going to change to something more reddish so it's more obvious that we can see what's going on. Okay, next, once I have changed the color, you can do any other stuff that you want as well. But for now, we're just going to leave it as default. Okay, so I'm going to do some rotation. I want the front of the shirt to be, the thread around the front of the shirt to be straight across horizontally. And that's what I'm focusing on. Okay, for the sleeve and the collar, I will apply a separate one later on. So now that I have already rotated it and I want to do some masking. So what I can do is I will go to this masking option here and add a black mask. And next I'm going to paint over the front portion of the shirt. You realize now I'm physically painting or manually painting the front of the shirt, but other section of the sleeve is being affected as well. So there's a better way or safer way to actually paint it, which is using the fill tool. So under the polygon fill on your top left, okay, on your toolbar here, just click on the fill tool here, and over on your right side, you'll see there are 4 options or 4 modes of applying it. So if I'm using polygon, which is the second option, I just click on any polygon and you will see that the square is actually being filled up with the texture. But what I want is actually to use this UV mode, the last one, where I can fill up the whole UV with that texture that I just created. So now that I'm done with this, I'm going to duplicate this model, or actually this layer, and I'm going to fill up the sleeve. Now I have only filled up one sleeve, and what I want to do is that I want to remove the others UV. So I switch over to black and I click on the UV spacing, and now what you can see is that I only have the sleeve as a separate layer. And in this sleeve, what I'm doing is that I'm going to rotate the layer as well, so that now they are facing downwards. Alright, and I'm going to duplicate the bottom layer one more time, Control D to duplicate. I'm going to repeat the same thing that I was doing just now. Okay, and the settings here are already the same. Last one, just going to duplicate again. Fill up the collar with white, switch over to black and remove the sleeve. So now I have everything being filled up, and they are all in different colors, or actually different layers. I can work on them differently. I can split the color if I want to. For example, here I can switch over to yellow or green. So I can continue to do whatever I want individually with all these UV panels. And the next step that I want to do is to actually group them up. Control G, select everything and press Control G, which will group it. I'm going to rename this as a base. And next we're going to continue texturing. So before proceeding, maybe what I want to do is to also reduce the scaling. So now that you really understand that you can actually play around with rotation to make sure that all the rotation are kind of aligned to what you want, now I can actually move forward to make it look slightly better. So I'm just going to play the scaling that I like. So maybe I put 20. I'm going to copy this value and paste it to the rest of it as well. Okay, so now that we have the textures being properly scaled, next thing I'm going to do is to play around with some of the smart masks that we have over on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to fill up a layer. It's a default white in layer, which is good enough. And I'm going to play around with some of these textures here, or actually smart masks. You just play around with it. You don't have to be controlled by, if it's gun age means you cannot use. You can actually use it and see if it's workable for you, and then just go ahead and play with it. Try and error and see what works for you. So the first one that I'm using is a fabric edge. I previously tested it out, and I think this looks good as well. But of course, you can see that the edges is very two-wedded. So I can actually go into the mask editor, go over to my global blur or global balance. Okay, so balance is the one that can reduce or increase. Blur is the one that will soften the edges for you, but I don't want it to be too soft. And I can of course change the color by going back to the first layer, the color slots, and actually play around with the color. So again, just for being extreme, I'm just going to paint it maybe green. Okay, and I don't need the height, I don't need the roughness, I don't need any matte or normal, so I can actually turn off the values here. Next, I can also play around with my blending mode. Okay, or I can reduce my opacity to make it a little bit more subtle and more realistic. So again, one more time, I'm going to apply a fill layer, alright, and I'm going to try something else, and I'm going to try using grounded, which obviously isn't going to be the best or the most accurate texture, but I'm just going to show you how you can make use of random stuff and try to get something out of it. So we got to try and error and see aesthetically what works for you. So in terms of rendering, we don't want it to be obvious, we don't want it to be too strong, we want it to be subtle, and we want to have some background story behind it as well. So thinking back about the assignment 1 where we give you guys the PDF of the story, background and stuff, think about it. If this kid, where is he staying? Is he staying in his secret hideout? Is he running away from somebody? Or is this guy a bad guy that you're modeling? So think about the story that you have and try to work out the texture from there. So here with the understanding, maybe I want this guy, the environment to be quite wet, maybe it's raining, so I want it to be like maybe he's a bit drenched, or maybe he's drying up or something. So I will use things like multiply, and you can see that with the multiply layer, okay, the material, the surface will actually get changed. So that's about it. You can go into the settings under the mask editor and play around with all the settings here or the parameters here to get the result that you want. So that's about it for this video. Again, it's all about experimenting. The more times you spend on it, the more you learn about the materials that you have or the masks that you have, and the life will be slightly more easier when you proceed on to the rest of the other model. Alright, thank you.